Hi everyone, welcome to the Inner Game of Change podcast, where we focus on exploring the multi-layers of managing organizational change effectively. Our guests cover a diverse number of critical topics to enable change adoption, including communication, leadership, training, change practice, process design, change capability, and much more. My name is Ali Jama. Today, I'm joined by Stewart Gillies to discuss how leadership, communication, and continuous learning are key enablers for leading change. Stewart is a partner at Red Sky. He's a passionate leadership development and communication consultant. For over 15 years, Stewart has been assisting companies to gain the most from their people by providing unique and memorable professional development experiences. Stu, welcome to the Inner Game of Change podcast.
Thanks, Ali. Thanks for having me. Wonderful to be here.
Thank you very much for your time. And so, Stu, the prevalent topic nowadays, obviously, is COVID-19 and what the sort of the influence and the impact on organizations and really the focus on leadership and how leadership or leaders actually lead the change. So, from your experience, maybe just share with us high level, what's your observation so far about how leaders are managing change?
I think it's a great question, Ali. I think it's on, the first front page of most leadership journals nowadays is what is happening and how are leaders responding to this new world we find ourselves in. I think COVID has been a real clarifier in many ways, both in an organizational context and in a personal context. And from what I've seen, it really has separated the wheat from the chaff in terms of leaders. I think leaders who may have been in positions of power or authority and may have been there only by virtue of experience or the luck of numbers going their way have really been kind of exposed, for want of a better term. And those who may not have been given the credit they were due have, in many cases, risen and shown themselves to be exceptional leaders in this new world that we find ourselves in. Which, it's quite warming for me to see, because I've been doing this now for 13 years, and I've worked in many organizations. And one of the things I see too frequently is people get put into management and leadership positions not because of their ability or talent or skill to lead others, but more just because they have been there for a certain number of years or months or whatever it might be, or they have hit some really good performance figures in the role they were previously doing, which is, these things are easy to measure, but they're not particularly good markers of potential leadership success. So I do think that COVID has been instrumental in really kind of showing those things for what they are. And, the result in all of this is hopefully a fantastically clarified version of what leadership should be. And I hope will be going into the future.
Yeah, great. And look, it is in time of crisis that you see real capabilities shown by different leaders. And perhaps going forward, perhaps organizations will actually review the strength of their leaderships based on what happened over the last 12 months or so. From your experience, how would you rate the current leadership change management capability? You've been through a lot of organizations and trained, and no doubt you walk away with some observations.
Yeah, again, this is a tough one. It's so varied, but I would say for the most part, the leadership change management capability is incredibly poor for the most part across organizations. I think change is hard. Let's get that out on the table right up front. It's really, really hard. Even on an individual level, looking at some fundamental things, I think change is hard. And when you make that a broader change, which requires the involvement and investment of more people, that just makes it more hard again. But the challenges that I see are people don't really understand how hard change is. And because of that, they pay only cursory attention to some of the initiatives, check a box, and assume everything will go well. So I don't think the vast majority of organizations, I shouldn't say the vast majority, I don't think the majority of organizations think about change in as holistic a way as they possibly should. And they certainly don't recognize and prepare for the challenges and create contingencies in the way that I would encourage them to do so.
Yeah, like from my experience, I think there's a lot of talk about how change management is important. And there's a lot of narrative. I think everybody's got their best intentions. But at the same time, you don't see it in execution. And you know, you struggle with it. And there are always barriers, you know, to managing change. Leaders tend to have you either have got leaders who are visionaries or coaches more, or subject matter experts rather than leaders, as you mentioned before. And you know, there's the phenomena that they throw this equation of 30% of projects only succeed and 70 fail. Like, I mean, I'm never convinced by this. They actually don't fail, but they are incomplete. And there's a cost, and there's a cost to it, which is the cost, financial cost, you know, and there's a human cost as well, and on engagement, on customer service, and all of those variables.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Ali, and I think you're right. Those 30-70 kind of statistics are very broad and blunt, and they don't really speak to the nuance that is underlying all this. So I totally agree. But as you say, even with those 30 that do succeed, you know, how is success measured? How long are those changes sustained? Do you get the result that the change initiative was seeking to actually create?
Yes.
And with all of these, I think a key question is, you know, what is the opportunity cost? This change comes at a huge, as you say, in many cases, financial, but human cost. And what else could you have done with that effort, energy, and money? And I think that's a question that not enough people consider.
Yes. Yeah. True. You coach a lot and share a lot of your leadership frameworks. And is there a framework you would like to share with us that you think leaders need to adopt to enable on them going forward? Because it's not just COVID-19 is what happens and the impact and the flow-on effect of COVID-19. I think we're going to see that over the next 24 months, if not more. Is there a framework that you think leaders should adopt?
Oh, Ali, I think there's some really good models out there. One of the ones that I'll talk to is John Cotter's 8-step change model. I think it's one of the foundational ones and a pretty complete model. But as with all models, it's only a model. It is not what I call correct, and it's certainly not exhaustive, but I think it can guide some really good thinking. So it's an 8-step model, which sounds on its face like a lot of steps, and it is. And I think it speaks to, in part, the complexity of change and the multiple things you must consider. The 8 steps, number one is creating urgency. So give people a reason for wanting this change, create that need. Number 2, form a powerful coalition. So create that core group of champions to drive that change. Step 3 is creating that vision for change. Step 4, communicate that vision. Again, this would be a real key element. I think a lot of people don't do that as well as they should. That communication of the vision, the why, is something people need to not just hear but believe. And I think that is something that isn't done nearly well enough or frequently enough. Step 5 is then to remove obstacles. And again, I think this is one of those things that is so frequently overlooked. Change, as we said earlier, is hard. And to ask people to do new and different things in addition to everything else they already do is basically, in my mind, setting yourself up for failure. So before you ask people to do new things, different things, remove things for them. So create space so that they can move and do these new things you're asking them. Step 6 is then create those short-term wins and celebrate them. I think momentum is key in change. And I think this is both in terms of individual change, if you're trying to create yourself a new habit, or organizational change, which is what we're talking about now. Create those small little steps, mark them out, and really celebrate them in a way that is authentic but meaningful. Step 7, obviously build on that change, so create the momentum and run it through. And then the last part is how do you then set those down and anchor those changes as part of the corporate culture and make it not just a change initiative, but now part of the DNA. So again, I think each of those steps is fundamental. I don't think it's the only way to think about change, but I think it is a relatively complete view of an organizational change initiative. And for a lot of leaders, they can benefit from looking at those steps discreetly and then really paying attention to them as they go through the process. Yes,
and Kotter's framework has been fantastic. And the great news is that Mr. Cotter himself has been really active to actually share his insights and views around organizations. And interestingly enough, a couple of years ago, Cotter has come up with a new book. It's called Accelerate. And he's taken the 8 steps, but he's adapted them. Now he's a change management guru, so he needs to adapt. So he adapted the 8 steps to the new agile, fast-paced environment. And so that's why he called it Accelerate. One of the big questions about his original model was it was built about 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago. And the world is actually expecting more agility and change adoption. So he came up with that book, and I read it a couple of times. It's very enjoyable, simple to follow. It's like a sequel to the first one, but a more adaptable framework. There are other frameworks out there. The ProSci, they've been doing a lot of work to actually adapt their model to the new world. And it's been really fantastic with those 2 frameworks. I mean, there are other frameworks as well out there. So I agree with that. And how from where you sit, you've probably known me long enough to know that I'm constantly looking for opportunities to learn, because the growth mindset has got no limits. So you gotta have to constantly try to understand how things work in the real world. And from where you sit, how is learning and adopting a growth mindset is even more important now for teams to adapt to change?
Totally agree, Ali. I think the ideas around growth mindset, popularized by Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K, I'm sure people know, I think are fundamental to learning generally and improvement generally. But the fact that the world is moving at such a rapid pace now means that you can no longer just have a single focal point, or you can't learn and expect that learning to deliver you value for the course of your career, which really now are careers. And this is where the world we find ourselves in requires, as you say, adaptability and flexibility. And for that to happen, you've got to embrace it with a growth mindset. Or if you come at this with a fixed mindset, you're really narrowing your options. You're limiting yourself in incredible ways. So I've got 2 daughters, 4 and 2, and it's one of the things I'm trying to instill from as young an age as possible. And it really starts with this kind of very simple addition to it's I can't do this goes to I can't do this yet. And this understanding that everything is a skill, everything can be improved if only you give it the due effort and attention. but not should you improve everything. I mean, you only have a finite amount of energy and attention during your life. So it's being diligent and deliberate about where you place that attention, but recognizing, the growth mindset is, I think, a huge separator in how individuals and therefore teams comprised of individuals will perform.
What would be some of the areas that you think, especially at a team member level or a leadership level, what would be some of the areas that we need to start exploring now and know and read more about?
Oh, Ali, what a question! That's a broad one. I think there's
what did COVID-19 expose?
Oh, okay. I think COVID-19 did a wonderful job of a few things. I said earlier it kind of clarified, and I think it clarified leaders. I think it sifted the wheat from the chaff in leaders, but I think it clarified for individuals things, not in all cases, but in many cases, things of importance. You often hear about people having, traumatic events befall them. Someone dies near them, or they contract a horrible disease, or something bad happens. And as a result of that, they have this reflective period that makes them really see what is now important to them. And often they have massive changes in focus or life or career or all three. And I think COVID for many of us has done a similar thing. We've all been through some sense of trauma in the last 12 or so months. And the amount of volatility in the world and the lack of predictability has meant that what we thought would happen almost invariably didn't and couldn't. And you and I are both based in Melbourne, and we are only too knowing of the sense of almost helplessness that happened for a long period, because we were in a pretty significant lockdown for a protracted period.
Yes.
Now, that was all not here to debate the validity of that. I think there were pros and cons of all of this, but I think it gave a lot of people time to really think about, am I doing with my life what I should be doing? Am I going to regret spending my time in the way that I have been for the last X number of months or years? So to answer your initial question, what did COVID surface and what should people spend time thinking about? I really think it all comes down to, or in large part, it primarily comes down to reflection and really looking within yourself as to who you are, what your values might be, what kind of things you really care about, and then trying to design yourself a life that works to fulfill those values through your talents and preferences.
Yeah.
So it really starts at that kind of fundamental thing. And I really do think COVID has done a wonderful thing for us in that respect, in many cases. What about yourself? What do you think, Ali?
Look, I definitely with COVID has made me think a lot about a couple of things. One is my tendencies, what stuff do I do well? What are my gaps working remotely specifically? I'm not a big fan of working remotely. I would like to have face-to-face and interact with people. But at the same time, it pushed me to think more and learn more and read more books and read more articles about what do people go through when they go through crisis. And COVID-19 is a big crisis. And this is not just a change of government. This just impacted everybody, especially here also in Melbourne and Victoria. So these are the things that made me think, what else can I do to help, people I work with, and find different ways to uplift their capability. And more than ever, I realize that I am in the right job when the change management is really, it's a leadership capability, an individual capability. That's why I keep promoting that every single team member in any organization, they would need to read or learn more about how to manage change.
Fantastic. I love it, Ali. Yeah. Great.
Now, the online learning has been on the rise for, again, because of COVID-19. I think it was before that, but obviously the need is pushed this urgency. How will organizations look at learning management in the new online and Zoom learning era? And is that going to continue?
Oh, look, again, okay. I think online is here to stay, in part, at least. I think online, as you say, has been around for a while, best part of 20 years in some version or other. And I think early on, people from up to my eye got really excited about the prospects of online, and then rapidly realized there wasn't the levels of engagement in many cases, and that really kind of relegated it in large part to compliance training and the like. So, but obviously that has not been where online has stayed. And I think COVID again accelerated the adoption of these other modalities of training and learning. And I think it's forced people like myself, who were previously not at all advocating of online learning, we've been forced to view it in a different light and look at it rather as a competitor, look at it as a complement to what we already do. So if I can give you our example, what we've done at Red Sky over the last 12 months is we had to move everything online. All of anything we delivered for the last really 9 months of 2020 was entirely over Zoom, Teams, WebEx, or any of these other platforms. But what we were careful not to do was just pick up the face-to-face version of what we did and then send it straight down a video link. I found that really disengaging, and I think a lot of people were very quickly webinared out. So we really had to change the way we thought about the learner experience as it was received through this digital environment. So that's part one, is really thinking about, yes, this is a tool, but it's not. It's a very different environment for the learner and for the trainer. And you've got to think about how you can really maximize the value. The second part of the online piece is going, well, now we've been forced into this environment where we're really looking at these different learning methodologies. Can we actually strip out some of the things that may have been less engaging from a program and get these across in a different way? And this is where we've gone away and spent a lot of last year developing a platform where we've populated it with a lot of the more theoretical elements of our programs that participants can consume prior to or between the sessions. So one of the analogies that I go for is, I think in many cases a 1 day, 2 day, 5 day program, whatever it was, of 2019 and before was tantamount to drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
The amount of information coming at you was just an absolute barrage. And it was frankly ridiculous to think that many people, if any, could assimilate much of that knowledge. But now we've turned the fire hose off, and we can really drip feed people these ideas, give them time and space to think about them, reflect upon them, and implement them in their work. And then what happens in these environments where we have them together, whether they be face-to-face or a virtual environment, is it's all to do with the application. It's all to do with discussion and application. And I think what I've found is the engagement levels are as high, if not higher, for the period of the program, but the skill uplift is so much greater over that period. So they would be the key things we've done in that online environment. And I do think, though online has been around for a while, people over-index to online only to come all the way back to purely face-to-face. I think there's going to be a bit of a pendulous effect again. I think we were all majority face-to-face, gone all online. And I think we've learned some really profound lessons that I hope we don't throw away when these barriers and these constraints leave us. So I'm already getting signs from some of my clients that they want me straight back in the room with all of their staff. And I think in part that is misguided. I think there is always or very often an opportunity for a blended experience to both, again, create that engagement, that experience, but also deliver what people are really here for, which is skill uplift.
Mm-hmm. And look, from my observation and the way I was thinking about this is that the online, there's the component of working remotely, and there's a lot of debate whether the remote working, is that going to stay or is going to go away? And I think it's going to stay, but a proportion of it, perhaps organization at some stage will have to do some correction and go back to the office is the normal place, but the remote working is going to be an option. But I also see the online, apart from the compliance piece, I also see it as an opportunity for one-on-one coaching. I think you can manage that online all the time. And perhaps it's not going to work a lot with a group of people. The level of motivation after 20, 30 minutes online is not going to be the same, and the energy. But I definitely, and I have used it over the last few months on one-on-ones, and it works perfectly fine with those. So I agree.
I totally agree.
I agree it's not going to go away. But one observation that I want to share, and maybe you have, I don't know if you've observed the same thing. We have been many organizations have been very good at giving the technology to people. Zoom, Teams, whatever you want to call attend, WebEx, and all of those things. What I haven't seen, they're probably it's already happening, but what I haven't seen is that organizations that sit and train people on maximizing the benefits of those tools. In fact, I've seen organizations, they strip off a lot of add-ons and features and collaboration features from Teams, and all of a sudden it becomes just an online, conference and a call. And I think it's a missed opportunity for organizations, because lots of those platforms and technologies and tools, you can maximize them. Teams is fantastic for doing collaboration sessions, but if you don't know how to use it, you're just going to use it as you use Zoom. In fact, some people say, why do we have Teams when we have Zoom or WebEx for that matter?
I totally agree, Ali. I think it's been, there's a few things there. You've hit some nails on the head. I think the tools themselves are fantastic, and I think they are, they were quite distinct early on. I think Teams and Zoom, and WebEx again, I think they all had fields for which they were known, but I think there's a bit of convergence, even though in the case of Teams, as you say, it's a cracking collaboration platform with some really robust functionality. Mm-hmm. But there's two things I couldn't agree more. The training and the expectations of how people use these tools is barely made obvious, if ever at all. But the thing that I find amazing is, for all the benefits we find, I used to be traveling frequently to meet with people and train people. Now my travel has been vastly reduced, which is a wonderful thing, I think, in many ways. And I think other people find that. But then what happens is the frequency, the number of these meetings goes up. Yes. So you're finding people saving time in so much of this, the travel and all these intermediary activities. But just the sheer number of meetings, because it's so much easier to schedule a meeting by just hitting a button rather than booking a room and the barriers to doing this are so low that people are now just back to back in Zoom or team meetings all day. And I think there's a real danger that, again, there's going to be a kind of a pendulum swing totally away from it, because they're seeing the negative and they're not stripping the positive and removing and ditching the negative. So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think they're great tools. They should be recognized for what they are, and they shouldn't be used for things they're not designed for. And I think you mentioned earlier, you're not a massive fan of working from home. You like to be face to face. And I think for what you do, and for people who have a typically more extroverted way of doing things, and for those tasks that really require high level collaboration, team building, creative tasks, all of those things, if you can, you should be co-locating. You should be in that physical space. And there's a lot of value there. But then I think there's as many where people co-locate, and that actually gets in the way of them being effective at doing what the task in front of them. Yeah. So it's really about looking at your day, looking at your week, looking at your tasks, and going, what is going to be best for this? Do I stay home for these days and go into the office for these days? But being, again, deliberate about how you spend your time and what you do with it.
Right. It is the inner game of change, Stewart. What makes it exciting to go to work every day?
Yes.
How would people reach you, Stewart?
Ali, I can be found online at LinkedIn. My name is Stewart Gillies, Stewart, Gillies, Gillies, and that is my LinkedIn address. I think I'm the only one there. Also, you can find me on my business website, which is www.redsky.com.au, and find my links through there. But I'm always up for a chat, an email, virtual coffee, or a face-to-face coffee, because I love meeting new people and hearing new ideas.
Fantastic. And we're going to have all your details on the webcast, Stu. And I really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. And until next time, take care.
Thank you, Ali. It's been a pleasure being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode with Stewart Gillies. To learn more about this podcast, check the innergameofchange.com.au website. To receive more podcasts, simply subscribe. If you know a professional whose ideas are worth listening to, please let me know. In our next podcast, we will meet with another guest who will share their thoughts and ideas on another lever for enabling positive change. Until then, stay well and stay safe.